This week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob is not brought to you by a grumpy old man. Or maybe it is. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob, and is episode 95 of the podcast, guys, which sounds insane to say it out loud. We're only 5 weeks away from big old 100, an episode I never thought we'd get to. Not that I didn't think the show would gain any traction or that I wouldn't be able to commit to it, but 100 just seemed like a monumental number and kind of this unreachable milestone. But here we are, 5 weeks out. So unless I give up now or in the coming weeks, we should hit that very, very quickly with all sorts of enthusiasm and excitement, which is very, very cool. Script for the big radio play is not quite finished. I'm definitely writing as fast as I can. It's been a bit of an insane week, which you'll hear about shortly, at least parts of it, I'm sure. And, life, guys, life is just insane. No guests this week. When I put up my weekly update the other day on Instagram, which I put up late because I forgot about it, I had booked in a session with my dad to come up on the show, but due to circumstances beyond my control or his, we weren't able to make that work. I was trying to get Tina on to the podcast as well. But again, it's been a weird kind of week. And with Mother's Day, when this drops, it will be Mother's Day, but right now it is the night before Mother's Day. I don't want to put any pressure on her. Pardon me. I am operating without a mouse, which is why you heard me sneeze. It's all getting thrown together with spit and glue tonight. But I did say there would be an episode, and whilst it won't be a super long one, I imagine it'll kind of cap out around half an hour, if that. There's definitely plenty to talk about. So it just means we're not doing any movie lists today. We are going to talk about movies in a different capacity. It's going to be a continuation of something I was talking about last year in one of the bonus episodes. I do apologize. I only had 4 hours sleep, so I also sound like a maniac. But yeah, last year when I was doing bonus episodes before I made the solo shows, just regular episodes, I would kind of come on, do movie reviews, and then also talk a little bit about my thoughts and feelings on things in the industry. The strike obviously came up during that time and a couple other bits and pieces as well. So something happened this week, or at least I noticed something this week that I hadn't kind of seen hit the shores in Australia until now. So that's what I'll be talking about this evening. Before I jump into that, is there anything else I need to let you guys know about? Not really. Episode 100 is the big one. Got some more guests coming up soon. I'm trying to get some new guests. I'm kind of juggling a number of conversations to get some new guests on as well as the existing ones also. But it's just a scheduling thing. So we will be getting there. I am expecting or hoping to get a collaboration with the boys, Kevin and Jason from Midnight Terrors again soon. We've been talking back and forth for a while. But as I said a few minutes ago when the show started, life just slows everything down. I went and saw Boy Kills World at the start of this week. So last Monday, I was going to go last weekend, and it was kind of a whole crazy ordeal. But Monday night, I was like, you know what? I'm going to treat myself to a Monday night movie. Had the cinema not quite to myself, which was nice for a Monday. It was nice to see a few other people there as well. But Boy Kills World has quickly risen to the top of the list for me of films this year. It's been an interesting year for movies. I've been to the cinema a lot, but I can't think of many that have really stuck out to me as being like, yeah, that is a clincher for the top 10 of 2024. Not to say there's no good movies. I've enjoyed everything I've seen. Late Night with the Devil I really liked as well. I've enjoyed just about every movie I've went to. A couple of them were 2023 releases that got staggered out for Australia. So Anyone But You was technically a 2023 release. Wonka was technically a 2023 release. Poor Things was technically a 2023 release. And there's heaps of stuff out at the moment that I want to see, but just time is being a little bit difficult. Like Civil War, I really want to see, but they're only showing at 3:00 in the afternoon, which doesn't work for my work roster. Challenges I want to see. Abigail I want to see. There's a ton of stuff I want to get out and see. Immaculate I missed. I still didn't see Mean Girls. That's out on physical next week, so I'll pick that up and then I'll watch Mean Girls. Yeah, so I think there is a great palette of films out there. I just haven't seen as much as I would have liked. But I am going to finally check out The Iron Claw in the coming week, hopefully, and The Zone of Interest as well. Again, both 2023 films, but I'm getting there. Um, which leads into the topic of this week, something that I don't think is going to be a surprise to anyone who pays attention um, to movies. I sorry, again, very tired. I don't think it's going to come as a surprise. This is something I've seen coming for, I want to say, since 2017. So going on 7 years now, but I think like the nail's been in the coffin for a while. And what I'm referring to, of course, is the decline of physical media. Um, so there were a couple of big stories last year that kind of showed this was starting to happen, but I hadn't really seen it hit Australian shores until this past week. So last year, and it happened mainly in the States. The UK, from what I understand, is still exempt to this. They've got some great online stores. Zavi is still operating strongly. They're not shipping to Australia anymore, which is a bummer, but they're still operating strongly. Rare Waves, who I only discovered in the last 6 months or so, fantastic. They do ship internationally to Australia and have an excellent selection. HMV is still running strong as far as I understand as well. So the UK seems to be exempt for the most part, although I thought Australia was, and then I discovered something this week. Although that being said, I'm not surprised by Australia being exempt. Australia's always been treated poorly with physical media. We've always caught the rough end of the stick. We were the last ones in kind of the major countries to get Blu-ray. Even with Blu-ray having been around for 20 years now, they're still not releasing every title on Blu-ray, which is ridiculous to me that they're doing DVD only. I am obviously a huge physical media fan. If you've ever paid attention to the Instagram page, if you've ever listened to me on the podcast before, you'll know I love it. I love DVDs, but let's be honest, DVD needs to go, and just have Blu-ray as your primary format and 4K as your premium. That's the way that it normally works. You normally have a primary and a premium. So back in the old day, it was VHS and then Laserdisc, and then Laserdisc kind of didn't really pan out for too long. It was bulky and expensive, so it was replaced with DVD. So you had VHS and DVD, and then when they phased VHS out, they brought Blu-ray in. But ever since they brought Blu-ray in, they've never got rid of DVDs. So we had three formats going. We have still have three formats going, which is confusing to consumers because they're always going to pick the cheapest option. Not everyone. Obviously, if you're a physical media fan, you're going to pick what you prefer. I think the bare minimum should be Blu-ray. But you will have people make the jump to 4K as well. But DVD, it just makes no sense there. And people always choose it, as I say, because it is the cheapest option. But if you took DVD away, then Blu-ray would be the cheap option. And then maybe you would see the decline in physical media slowing down a little bit. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. As I mentioned, I've only had 4 hours sleep. I kind of made a last-minute decision to pop an episode out. Well, I knew I was going to put an episode out, but I didn't know that this was going to be the topic until a couple of hours ago. And obviously, it's a subject I'm very passionate about, so I'm going to sound a bit marble mouthed, but there is a point here. So the big news that happened last year was that two major retailers in America, Walmart and sorry, maybe it wasn't Walmart. There was a big one, but Best Buy is one of them, and there was another major retailer, and they said, "Hey, we're going to stop stocking physical media." So Best Buy in particular, if you're not from the States, were one of the largest suppliers of DVDs and Blu-rays in America. They also did all the very cool like Steelbook exclusives and stuff like that. So they've been a big hand in the physical media market in America for a long time. So when Best Buy announced they were closing their doors to that area of business, it was pretty shocking. Like even here in Australia, collectors felt it. I don't know many people who import from Best Buy. I don't think Best Buy does ship internationally to Australia. But if you're a physical media fan, you know the big retailers, and I think we were all pretty shocked to see that happen. The next big thing that happened was very quietly in Australia, Disney announced, and again, it was barely announced, it was more of a whisper, that they would stop printing physical media in Australia. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was the last release. I've talked about this a lot. I posted about it a lot. I was furious about it at the time, and I'm still not thrilled about it. But Disney were like, "Oh, we're not doing any more. We've got a streaming service." And I said at the time, just wait. Like in 6 months' time, the streaming prices are going to hike up, and they have. I got an email from Disney Plus only about a month or so ago saying that my pricing was going to jump from $13 a month to $17 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're paying for as many streaming services as I am, which isn't even as many as most people, I think I pay for 3, maybe 4. Most people who are into streaming pay for a lot of streaming services. Streaming is now more expensive than cable ever was. and more confusing because it's not all in one place like cable had it. But when that announcement came through, it was really a poorly picked time because it was right in the middle of the writer's strike and the actors' strike, which means that by cancelling physical media in a major territory like Australia, they were cutting off wages to people who had worked on those films. And I do think it was a strategic play. I think Disney did it on purpose. They didn't do it in America, obviously, because that would have caused major backlash. But to do it in Australia, which is a major market, but definitely a quieter part of the world, most people wouldn't notice about it or care about it with everything else going on. But in the strikes, they were obviously debating or protesting pay, AI, and all this sort of stuff. But the pay was the big thing. Writers weren't getting paid residuals. Actors weren't getting paid residuals because streaming and free-to-air TV are two very different things. Free-to-air TV has something called syndication. So once you play a movie or a TV show, it can repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, and forever repeat. The actors, the writers, the director, they all get a piece of it. With streaming, there is no syndication because it's just always there. So the idea was that once it launches on streaming, you get paid once and that's it. So that's why the strikes existed. And that's why people were, furious with all the major studios, particularly Disney. And when Disney pulled the plug on physical media in Australia, I thought that was a very interesting and poorly timed decision because what they've done is cut off income to their actors and writers during a strike where they're striking about the pay they're not receiving. Anyway, that all leads up to this week. So this week, I mentioned I want to see the Iron Claw, I want to see Zone of Interest. So I was like, you know what? I've been buying a lot of kind of secondhand Blu-rays lately. I've been importing a lot, but I haven't been supporting local Australian businesses enough. And I should do that. I should go out there and buy money on the counter so I can pick up some new releases. But also, like, new releases are expensive. But I went to my local JB Hi-Fi. So for those of you who are not in Australia, JB Hi-Fi is basically the Australian equivalent of a Best Buy. JB Hi-Fi has been around since, I want to say, the late 80s, early 90s. My history is probably not 100% correct there, so listeners can correct me if I'm wrong. And they basically built their company on physical media. So they started out as one store in a little suburb called East Keilor, which is not too far from where I grew up. And they started off by selling CDs and hi-fi systems. That was kind of their big thing. And then with physical media on the rise in the 90s, with VHS and DVD, they started stocking that. So if you're in Australia, you know JB Hi-Fi as a white goods store. Like, that's what they sell now. They sell computers and white goods and games to an extent, but it's mainly hardware. That's not what the company was. The stuff that the company started off selling, car audio, speaker systems, CDs, most of the stuff they built the company on doesn't really exist anymore. They've gone mainstream, which is fine. Like, that's how you survive in an economy. That's how you survive in a 21st century world, market. But it is really sad to see that things they kind of built themselves on are going away. So the reason for this is, me bringing this up, is that I went to JB Hi-Fi on my lunch break. I was like, you know what? I was going to order some stuff online, but I figured, you know what? I've done a lot of online ordering. I'd like to go into a shop and browse. So on my lunch break, I went to my local JB Hi-Fi, and to my shock, there was no Blu-ray section anymore. Not a single DVD to be found or a single Blu-ray to be found. Now, I haven't really talked about it on the show before, but I actually worked at JB Hi-Fi for 6 years. That was my job through my 20s. I worked in the movie department, which I'm sure is a surprise to everyone listening to this podcast. And I remember having a very distinct conversation with my boss in 2017 or 2018 because the company had made a decision to make some changes. So if you've never been to a JB Hi-Fi before, if you've never worked at JB Hi-Fi, you might not be familiar with all the terms they use. But basically, the store was divided into two parts. You had hardware and software. So hardware is your computers, your headsets, your kitchenware, all the stuff, anything that's basically a big ticket item, your TVs, your DVD players, that's all hardware. And then you have software, and software was DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs, and games. And in 2017, 2018, the company made a decision to move the games portion of the company from software to hardware. And I remember right then and there, that's when I smelled the blood in the water, and that's when I started to realize things were on the decline. Because by moving the games department into the hardware side of thing, the commission-driven part of the business, the sales-driven part of the business, that told me right then and there that was a part of the business they were going to continue to support. If you're attaching a commission to it, you're investing money in it, you bring salespeople on, that's going to grow your business. By splitting that away from CDs and DVDs, I could tell right then and there, and this is not me having a crack at the company, like, you do what you have to do to survive, but I could tell right then and there that physical media was on the decline. It was on its way out. Like the company was giving up on it. And I said to my boss right then, I said, do I need to start looking for a job? Because if you're moving your resources away from software and you're moving your biggest earner from software to hardware, that tells me the company doesn't really care about DVDs and CDs anymore. And that makes me think that I'm going to be obsolete within a couple of years. And my boss was like, no, not at all. Which I didn't believe for a second. And now we're seeing it happen. DVDs and Blu-rays are being pulled from JB Hi-Fi stores. So not all of them. And they still have an online business, of course. They haven't started pulling that away from the website, but it is disappearing from stores, which is it is a real tragedy to see. Now, I know a lot of people will listen to this and be like, doesn't matter. Why do you need DVDs anymore? Why do you need Blu-rays? Why don't you just get streaming? Like streaming is so convenient. It's cheap. You're not spending $30 on a Blu-ray disc. You're not spending $20 on DVD. You pay $10 a month, $15 a month. You have all the movies you want. Yeah, that is true. There's a really good argument for streaming. Brian Rupert from Reviewing History was on the podcast late last year, and he had a really good point about streaming because I was saying to him that whilst I get it and I understand the convenience of it, I still prefer physical. And he was in the exact same boat as I am. He said he likes as well, but he prefers physical. But he said that they've got the marketing all wrong. They've misunderstood what streaming is for. The concept is great, but the people in charge of streaming are utilizing completely incorrectly. And he said what streaming should be is your digital library for things that are no longer available. And I 100% agree, because I wouldn't begrudge a store or a distributor for not stocking Manos, The Hands of Fate on DVD, or The Room, or Plan 9 from Outer Space. These are in like small budget cult films. Some of them never had a distributor. The Room, completely independently sourced. I wouldn't expect a Warner Brothers or a Village or a Disney to keep that in stock and put it on the shelves every month, because they're not big sellers. Like I can guarantee that those three titles I mentioned, you could put one of them in each state of the country per month, and maybe they would sell, but probably half of them would still be on the shelves a month later. So I get it, like, and that's what streaming should be used for. But what they're doing instead, and this happened during the pandemic, was streaming became the main source of distribution. They stopped the theater model during the pandemic, of course, because we couldn't go to the movie theaters, but they loaded up their streaming services with new releases and made it the premier way to watch movies, which thankfully big directors like Chris Nolan, I think Martin Scorsese was one of them, and a few other people have really pushed back on. And like Scorsese actually severed his contract with Warner Brothers over it, because he wants people to go to the theaters first, and he's a big believer in physical media as well. The reason I have problems with this is that they've been saying for the last 20, 30 years, and this is all going to sound a little bit confusing, like a bit of a tangled web, but it all does tie in. For the last 20, 30 years, they've been saying that the cinema is dying. People aren't going to watch movies in theaters anymore. They're going to wait and watch them on their phones. And then those same people who've been worried about it, i.e. the studio heads, have been releasing all their new releases, premiering them on streaming services, which is taking money out of the theaters, which is where they want people to go. How does this impact physical media? Why does physical media matter there? Well, from a financial side of things, if you care about going to the movies, if you care about the future of movies, if you like your franchise movies, or if you like seeing independent stuff, physical media has always been a second bite of the apple for lower performers. If you release your movie opposite of Avengers Endgame or Spider-Man No Way Home, or any number, Mission Impossible, any like major tentpole films, your small film is not going to compete. Those films aren't for everyone, but they are for the general audience, and most people are going to go and see that over something like Raw, or I'm just looking at my shelf to try and find some independent films or smaller films. End of Watch, for example, like Empire Records, like those big tentpole films are always going to take the lion's share of the takings. But when it comes to DVD and Blu-ray, when it gets released later on, people will find the movie, they'll put down their $20, their $30, and suddenly a movie that maybe didn't hit its box office expectations in the theater starts making its money back. That's how Kevin Smith made a career. I've talked about Kevin Smith a lot. I'm a big fan of him. And he said time and time again, like, his movies would, do okay in the theater. He would have pretty small openings, but what would happen is then he would put the DVD out for sale, and that's where all his money was made. That's why he was able to keep making movies throughout the 90s and 2000s. A lot of people was like, Kevin Smith, he's a hack. Like, why would he keep making movies? Because he never made movies on huge budgets and he always made his money back. And that's all the studios care about. So obviously all of that impacts the studios and the people making the films. But if you're listening to this, you're probably not in those areas. In fact, what you're doing is you're consuming and like, but why do I care about that? Well, first of all, you should care about choice. As a consumer, you should care about choice. You should be able to buy movies and consume them the way you want. If you want to use streaming, go for it. I'm not against streaming. I'm not anti-streaming. I don't think people who use streaming are bad people. I use streaming every day. Okay, so I'm not anti. I've got a friend. Actually, we all know Jess Brown, friend of the show. She's won a couple of times. Every time she messages me about a movie she watched, she always says the same thing. I know you hate streaming. That's her opening line in every single message she sends me when she watches a movie on streaming. I don't hate streaming. I don't think they've got it right yet, even though it's been going for almost 10, 15 years in Australia now. We don't have it right yet, and it is hurting the industry, but I don't think it's bad. I just think it's poorly designed. If that's how you consume your media, then great. But you should be allowed to have a choice as a consumer. If you want to watch Barbie on Prime or no, Binge, it's on Binge right now, that's the way you prefer to watch it, then that's fantastic. But if you love that movie and you want to buy the box, the special edition box with the 3 discs of bonus features, and you want to put it on your shelf and keep it forever, you should be allowed to do that as well. You should be able to. The other problem I have with streaming, and we've seen this a lot with Disney lately, but it's not just Disney. We've seen it with Universal, who is Peacock in America. Universal's distribution's a bit weird in Australia. I can't remember who owns what. But if it's on digital only, then studios can go in and make changes. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a really good example that's happened recently. In the last couple of years, in the last couple of years, there were 2 Universal shows. One of them was Community, and one of them was The Office. There's an episode of The Office towards the end of the series. It's a Christmas episode where Dwight dresses up as Belschnickel, which is like a German-Dutch Christmas icon, and he gets Nate, who is not the smartest character in the show, to dress up as a very racially inappropriate character called Black Peter. Now, this was topical at the time because in the news, there was a lot of outcry because in Europe, there were some Scandinavian countries that were still observing this very outdated racist character called Black Peter. And The Office was making fun of it. It was topical, it was referential, and you actually never saw Nate in blackface. All you saw at the end of the episode was him in the warehouse or where it was, and he'd washed most of the paint off, but there was still some left. So he never actually appeared in blackface. It was very, as I said, it was making fun of an item in the news and commenting on it. Some were angry, so the every streaming service that had the rights to The Office at the time took that episode off completely. So that part of the story just disappeared from the season, and unless you have the DVD box set, which thankfully I do, you couldn't watch it again. Now, the reason I have problems with that is that's censorship for everyone. I'm not anti-censorship. I feel like censorship does go too far sometimes, but as a parent now, I'm glad there's censorship. My daughter's 3.5. She doesn't need to see, Logan hack up a bunch of mutants, in the 2017 masterpiece Logan. One day she will, but at 3.5 she doesn't. So censorship is important. Ratings are important for a reason. But just like whether you can choose between a streaming service and a physical copy, you should be allowed to choose what you do and don't watch. That's why you don't really see too many movies get banned in Australia anymore, or America, or the UK. There's still some films that get banned, but it's less and less common because we're all adults. We can choose what we want to watch. So that really frustrated me. A really good example of censorship, or I guess like someone changing the art form and not allowing the consumer to go back and see the original, is Star Wars. So if you're younger than me, you might not be familiar with this, but if you're my age or older, you will definitely be familiar with it. In the 70s, George Lucas made Star Wars. 1977, Star Wars comes out. A couple of years later, Empire Strikes Back. A couple of years after that, Return of the Jedi. And everyone loved them, except for George Lucas. George Lucas went on and on about how because of the limitations of the technology, because of what he wanted to do, kind of his grand design, those films were the best they could be, but he wanted to change them. So in the 90s, he re-released all of them. They were remastered director's cuts or director's editions. And we have the whole Han versus Greedo debate, like who shot first. There's weird CGI inputs of different characters, like just additional monsters for no absolute reason. And in Return of the Jedi, Hayden Christensen replaces the original actor who played Darth Vader because they was like, well, now we've got the prequels, we should make it all consistent. Now, I have no problem with that. If you want to listen to a really good debate about a really good discussion, actually, you can go to the boys at Movie Boners. Dustin and Jake did a whole episode on director's cuts recently, and they talked about that for quite a bit, and they did a really good job, far better than I am off 4 hours of sleep. But the reason I bring that up is that I have no problem with George Lucas doing that. That's fine. But what he did that I don't agree with, and what the studio did that I don't agree with, is that they stopped printing the original cuts. So everything that was released on VHS, Laserdisc, DVD prior that had the original version of the film on there, you cannot get it anymore. They refuse to release it. They don't put that original edition out anymore. You can only get the edited ones. And that's a problem. Because you should be able to purchase the version of the film that was made available, I think. Another example of censorship through streaming, which would not be impacted by DVD, is Community. So I talked about The Office. In Community, again, it was another blackface thing, but this one wasn't even blackface. This one was just dumb. So there's an episode of Community where they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and Ken Jeong's character, Ben Chang, comes dressed up as a dark elf, and he uses black paint. A dark elf is a magical creature and does not have a race that is akin to anything on Earth. But someone got angry about it, so the episode was cut from streaming. So every streaming service that had Community dropped that episode as well, which is a real shame because it's one of the best episodes of the show, and not because of that joke. Like that joke for me, like the best part about Ken Jeong's appearance in that movie is the way they fade him out, like when he gets killed on the first roll of the dice. That's a genius joke. But that episode is amazing, and it was great writing, and it was great performances, and everyone worked hard on that episode. But someone complained, and then all the streaming services dropped it. So unless you have it on DVD, all the hard work that went into the episode was for nothing because no one got to see it anymore. I feel like I'm going on a tangent. I feel like I'm very wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, just like in Doctor Who. I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're shifting in the wrong direction. That's my concern. I saw earlier this year that Disney was stopping printing DVDs and Blu-rays in America as well, and that got me really worried. But then a press release came out that they'd actually sold the distribution rights to Universal and Sony. At least I think it was Universal and Sony. So they were just closing up their distribution leg, but they weren't closing down physical media. So I do hope with that we do see Sony and Universal do the same distributions in Australia, because I got a 3.5-year-old man. Like, she should be allowed to buy Frozen on DVD or Blu-ray and put it on her shelf in her room. If that's her favorite movie, she should be allowed to do that and treasure it. Movies don't mean a lot to everyone, and I get that. I understand that when I'm talking about this, this is a very first world problem. Most people aren't worried about this sort of thing. The general audience are happy to go to the movie theater or not, and then just watch everything on streaming. But I think it's a slippery slope, and I think that once you leave the option for people who weren't involved in the original creation of the film to start tinkering with things so they can shape it to their agenda, I think that's dangerous, because suddenly we're politicizing films. And that isn't the point that wasn't even the point I was trying to make here, but that is a really important part as well. But at the end of the day, I think that, like, we haven't stopped printing books. You know, we've gone digital with books. We've got our Kindles, our e-readers and stuff like that. But we haven't stopped printing books. We haven't stopped releasing music physically. In fact, vinyl's back. You know, like, it was all on CDs and then it was going away, and then vinyl came back, and now it's cool again and people buy vinyl. And sure, most people are streaming. I'm not ignorant to that. I don't think we need to stop. Like, we can have both. You know, don't get rid of streaming. Streaming is obviously very convenient for a lot of people. It's cheap for a lot of people, unless they're paying for multiple streaming services, because you can't just have, like, nothing's all in one place. You have to have like 10 streaming services to get everything. Don't get rid of it, but don't get rid of physical media either. Do smaller batches. Instead of Disney closing up shop last year, which I thought was such a dumb thing, just do a numbered release. 200 copies of Guardians of the Galaxy. It'll sell out every single time because I guarantee you there are at least 200 people in Australia that would buy a Blu-ray. Easy. Do 200 copies of Indiana Jones. Like, it's not rocket science. If you have to charge a bit more to guarantee, which you do already, if you're getting a steelbook, it's like $50. I have paid so much money on steelbooks for movies that aren't even that good. And I'm sure people are like, well, then if it's not very good, why would you do that? Because I love movies. Like, if we're 95 episodes in and you haven't grasped that concept yet, I can't help you. But it's important, man. It's not important to most people, and that's fine. But let's just keep doing it. Let's keep putting them out. Like, it'll be interesting to see the next generation of filmmakers. And I don't mean like the ones in college or university right now. I'm talking the ones in 20 years' time. Because like you've got filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan who never went to film school. They just borrowed VHSs and then learned how to do it. And then you've got people who grew up watching Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan and Robert Rodriguez and Steven Spielberg, went to school and then started putting stuff out. But like, what's the generation of filmmakers who watched everything on a phone in the toilet going to be like? It's going to be interesting. This is not meant to be a somber episode, by the way. As I said, I don't mean to like bring the room down, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. Like, if you're into film at all, if you like movies, you got to keep supporting physical, at least a little bit. We can't let this die. Like, because if we let physical media die, then I think it's going to be the first of a number of dominoes that end up kind of crippling or negatively impacting the film industry. And if we all love movies, we should support it somehow, some way. That's pretty much it. I didn't talk about this, but the JB Hi-Fi store I went to, when I saw there was no Blu-rays, I went to the counter just in case. I hadn't been to that store in a long time. I went to the counter. I was like, "Hey, like, sorry to bother you. No Blu-ray section anymore?" And the girl behind the counter looked at me with such disdain and treated me like I was such a moron. And she was like, "No, we moved into this other store ages ago." How was I to know that? Like, I hadn't been to the store in ages. Like, I don't know. I could do a whole other episode on the way that kids these days work, and I'm turned to a grumpy old man. But like, the service industry is rough. It's changed a lot. But look, anyway, this is not meant to be like a grumpy old man episode. This is not meant to be getting angry or frustrated. But I just, like, this is an industry I love. I love movies. Movies mean so much to me. Every major event in my life, I can link to a film. I can talk to you about, every year on my birthday, I go to the movies. And if it's not on my birthday, I will go to the movies for my birthday. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can tell you the dates that I went on with Tina. Like, most of our dates were movies, and we went and saw great stuff and not so great stuff, but it always like sparked a conversation. Movies led me to people like Nick Owen, who's fantastic, one of my favorite people in the world. Movies led me to this podcast, which led me to all my international friends, people like Michael from We Love Horror, Kevin and Jay from Midnight Terrors, the boys at Movie Bonus. Like, movies are my way of communicating with people. I talk a lot about the gift of film on this podcast. I'm always asking guests, like, what's a movie that someone gifted you that kind of changed your life? And that's what I try to do with this show. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to change lives. I don't think I'm doing that. But I talk about movies with people on this show because there's so much great stuff out there that I haven't seen, let alone everyone else. And I think it's a real shame if you like movies and haven't seen a great one in a while, or you're not aware of something cool. So go out and support physical media. Go do it. If you're in Australia, hit up JB Hi-Fi. Like, they're always doing sales. Australia's always gonna be treated like garbage. Play. There's a really great store in Melbourne called Play Music DVDs. They're a fantastic store. I've ordered stuff from them before. They're an independent. They do a lot of imports, but it's great. Go to your cash converters, get your secondhand Blu-rays. Import rarewaves.com are fantastic. They're still not, picking up the phone for doing a collab, but that's totally fine. Outrun DVDs, they're an Australian company. They've just started recently. The guys at Cinemaniacs, who are a division of Acme, they do physical media. Zavi, if you're in the UK, they're great. HMV in the UK, great as well. I haven't bought from them because they don't ship to Australia in a little while, but the last time I was in the UK, I spent I want to say it was £1,000 on Blu-rays. They have so much variety that you can't get in Australia. In America, there's plenty of places. I think Walmart are still doing them. They've taken over the exclusives and stuff like that. Amazon totally good for physical media as well. Get on board. If you don't have a physical media collection and you don't plan on starting one, find a friend who does and buy them a Blu-ray. Buy them a DVD, or start your own physical media collection. Like, let's get things up and running again. It's important. You don't have to have 1,000 or 2,000. I don't even know how many movies I have anymore. You don't have to have them all. You don't have to have an insane collection like me, but I think it's important that we buy the things that we love and we support the industry we love. Because if this dies, I do think the dominoes will start to fall. Also, like, just another thing to point out, in the pandemic, which I worked through the entire pandemic. Like, I spoke to people and they were like, "Oh man, I've watched all of Netflix. There's nothing left to do." And I remember being so annoyed, being like, "Oh no, what a terrible problem to have," because I worked the entire pandemic. I never had a day off. I was very lucky to have a job. Don't get me wrong. I loved, being able to pay my bills and not having to worry about my job security. But I would have liked to have watched all of Netflix. But if you're in Australia, certainly in Victoria, first month of the pandemic, you couldn't watch all of Netflix because everyone was using the internet and streaming. So streaming, internet, like, the infrastructure couldn't support it. So a lot of people struggled to stream anything. I don't have any problem watching movies because I got them all on physical. Anyway, this has been a real rambling mess of a show. And definitely not like the usual upbeat, bubbly tone of the podcast. But as I said, like, I think it's an important thing to talk about. We need to, physical media is really important. Movies are really important to me. If you love movies, support the industry. Next week, I should hopefully have my dad back on the podcast. I'm trying to get him back on to talk about his favorite 2000s movies. Liz and David, I'm trying to coordinate with them as well to do their 2000s movies, but they've also got to record something for episode 100. Spoilers. So the next few episodes is going to be interesting. You might get a few more solo shows from me. I'm going to go see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes next week with Maddie. So I'll probably talk about that in a review at some point as well. And but we'll just see how we go. And then I know what episode 101 is going to be also. And then there might be a little bit of a break, but I'll let you guys know more about that in the coming weeks. The show's not going anywhere. There's just some things coming up that are going to impact the show a little bit potentially. But once I'm able to talk about those things, I will. But in the meantime, thanks for listening to my rambling nonsense. Go out and buy a DVD, buy a Blu-ray. Just keep supporting movies in the theaters. Vote with your wallet. Go see stuff even if people tell you it's bad. Because the only person who can tell you it's bad is you. That's going to do it for this week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob. Thank you all for listening. More fun stuff coming up in the future as well, coming weeks. If you want to go follow me on Instagram, I Was a Teenage Film Snob, underscores between every single word. But until then, as I say every week, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.